Okay. Let's start by bowing in. And welcome everyone to the Buddhist Path of Awakening course. We're working our way through Shantideva's Bodhicharya Avatara. And tonight we're doing chapter 6, which is on patience. I'll do the first 33 verses, I think, and then Michael will do the remaining ones up to about a halfway point in this chapter. So I'd like you all to begin by taking a good meditation posture and bringing your mind right here into this present moment. Clear, effortless, awake, even cheerful. This is what in our tradition is the core of awareness. It goes by different names. Kagyus call it ordinary mind. The Nyingmas call it insight awareness. But it's simple, contentless, clear awareness of whatever is arising of the six nobles, meaning sights, sounds, smells, tastes, bodily sensations, and mental events of all kinds. We can rest here in this. This is the foundation for patience. You can relax your physical posture however you like, but if you can, keep your mind here in this clarity. Patience is not a matter of grinning and bearing it, of sort of gritting your teeth and getting through it. It's a matter of coming back to fundamental intelligence here and now, again and again, and seeing whatever arises. It might be something upsetting, a cause for pain, and we see it with this kind of clarity. Or it might be a pleasure that wants to take us away. And again, when we remember to come back to awareness out of thought, we're right here, just like this. So let's start with reading. Maybe Barry?
Yeah. Wow. Is no one else hearing that, or is that just?
I'm hearing it.
I hear it.
Yeah.
I hear
it.
I don't hear it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I hear it.
Yeah. It was like a radio between stations, but okay, I think we're good now. Shall we begin reading?
Yeah.
Okay, Carolyn.
So first stanza, please.
Patience. All the good works gathered in 1,000 ages, such as deeds of generosity and offerings to the blissful ones, a single flash of anger shatters them.
This, a very famous stanza from the Bodhicharya Avatara. Anger is so destructive. When it occurs, it takes a long time to rebuild trust. It has long-term consequences. I mean, we've all been aware of family feuds, which many of us have or are experiencing. We condone and hold on to and remain unwilling to examine the anger. That's what allows the family feud to continue. Shantideva wants us to understand how anger can undermine years of love and affection and trust. It is the worst of the defilements, the klesha. We can stubbornly hold on to our anger for lifetimes. And I know that there are people here, including myself, who have loved ones who are alienated in anger. And there's not much that we can do at this point, except to extend love and understanding as best we can. Family feuds and ethnic rivalries can go on for centuries. Think of Rwanda and so many others. What's going on right now between Israel and Palestine? It's just, this is anger, hatred. Shantideva wants us to understand how unnecessary anger is. It's fueled by our thoughts and stories. Always. We have to have a rationale for our anger, and it provokes it, keeps it alive. These fundamental stories that we tell ourselves about how that person is terrible and we're going to get even, on and on. Exploring our anger can be a path to awakening bodhicitta. By coming back to this clear awareness of the situation, we have a chance to go deeper and deeper into reality, which is bodhicitta, awakened mind. So it represents an opportunity if we don't just get caught up in it and act out. Even if you do superficial good deeds, like giving to charity or cultivating admiration of others, if you're aggressive in your dealings, that's how you'll be regarded in the world. You might smile and give generously, but if you frequently explode in anger, people never feel comfortable in your presence, and you'll never have peace of mind. So would someone read the next stanza?
That would be Philip.
No evil is there similar to anger, no austerity to be compared with patience. Steep yourself, therefore, in patience in various ways, insistently.
Yes. This is the theme of this chapter, the harm caused by anger and the benefits of patience. And patience, you should really realize that the core of patience, the way to exercise patience, is not grinding your teeth and bearing the pain. It's coming back to awareness. That's where true patience lies. This is bodhicitta, however deep it goes, and it will go deeper and deeper the more you practice it. It has awareness of what's going on, and ultimately it has heart that arises, love of what is going on in this present moment. Evil in this stanza means to cause harm and to take pleasure in it. Anger is the worst form of evil. It can be habitual, self-justifying, even self-righteous. I don't agree with Pema and the Dalai Lama that there may be times when anger is appropriate. Intelligent, wrathful action, yes. Anger, no. Anger is an emotion which rises and takes us over. But we can exhibit intelligent, wrathful action. So, for instance, the example that a friend of mine gave is a minor example of a mother and her child standing on a curb, and the child, the young toddler perhaps, starts to step off into traffic, and she screams at the child, "Get back!" That's the intelligent form of wrath, but it's not anger. Anger is destructive. You want to destroy the object. It says anger can be motivated by compassion, but hatred is always accompanied by ill will. So ill will is really the key. So patience is austere, he says. Why is it austere? Because it boycotts and removes the workings of ego. Shenpa, that's getting hooked. Kleshas, the klesha of anger above all. How? By coming back to mindfulness. Whenever we're caught up in anger, we have lost our mindfulness altogether. So would someone read the next stanza?
Steve.
Those tormented by the pain of anger never know tranquility of mind. Strangers they will be to every pleasure. They will neither sleep nor feel secure.
And this is what anger does to us, robs us of sleep and peace of mind. How do we deal with this situation? First of all, you become aware of it, that you're caught in anger. Then you see the story that is fueling it, because there's always a story. That person shouldn't have done this. They have no right, blah, 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 whatever it might be. And then you also notice where the anger lies in your body and the feeling of it, wherever it may be. Probably a congestion in your torso, but who knows? It's up to you. So you replay the story with attention to your thoughts and feelings that kindle the anger, and then while gently breathing in and out, you can take the anger as the focus of your awareness without repressing it or acting it out. You get to know it beyond words as it arises in the body, the feeling, the color, the taste, the temperature, the energy of it. And beneath the anger, additionally, you can become aware that there is a spot of pain, of sorrow, where you're so hurt. You stay with that, and this will help with the anger. Above all, though, we have to get rid of the story. We have to see it and realize that it is a story that we have concocted, and we can let it go. The next two stanzas.
Fred.
Right.
We're reading 3 and 4, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. We're reading just three. Just three. I'm sorry.
Okay. Those tormented by the pain of anger never know tranquility of mind. Strangers they will be to every pleasure. They will neither sleep nor feel secure.
Well, he's describing an extreme case, but all of us experience this from time to time when we get angry, those of us who do, and we get caught up in the self-righteousness of it, and the attack of it robs us of sleep and peace of mind. And again, the injunction, the instruction, is to separate the story from the energy and then become aware of the energy, and the energy will dissipate. So now we read 6.4 and 5.
Trip.
Even those dependent on their Lord for gracious gifts of honors and of wealth will rise again and slay a master who is filled with wrath and hate. His family and friends he grieves and is not served by those his gifts attract. No one is there, all in all, who, being angry, lives at ease.
Yeah. So people of anger, perhaps abusive parents, partners, bosses, who knows? They have no joy. They repel those who might otherwise love them. They can't see how destructive their anger is, and so they have no peace of mind, consumed by it, estranged from those they would love. The point? To acknowledge our own anger and the way it harms us as much as it does the other. The sixth stanza, would somebody read that?
Dan.
All these ills are brought about by wrath, our sorrow-bearing enemy. But those who seize and crush their anger down will find joy in this and future lives.
So think of your anger as your sorrow-bearing enemy. That's wild. And refrain from it. Refrain from getting hooked and carried away by the rage. For our own sake and for all, shift your allegiance from neurosis to sanity. And the next two stanzas.
Mark.
I'm sorry, is that 7 and 8?
Mark, yeah, next two stanzas, 7 and 8.
Thank you. Sorry. Getting what I do not want and all that hinders my desire. In discontent, my anger finds its fuel. From this, it grows and beats me down. Therefore, I will utterly destroy the sustenance of this, my enemy, my foe who has no other purpose but to hurt and injure me.
So the Buddhist teachings delineate three forms of suffering: getting what you don't want, not getting what you do want, and a general sense of malaise that sometimes takes us over. And this is what is being referenced here: getting what I do not want and all that hinders my desire. Those are the two, the main ones that are most obvious. And this kind of anger can escalate very quickly and very frighteningly. So at any point, practice patience instead of going with the anger. And then the suffering and the consequences, internal and external, what you do is catch yourself, see it, cut the storyline, feel the energy. When we're caught up in the anger, we're asleep, we're on automatic. And the only way to free ourselves from it and from all of the damage that it does to both us and others is to come back to awareness. So someone read 6.9. Number 9.
Shani.
So come what may, I will not upset my cheerful happiness of mind. Dejection never brings me what I want. My virtue will be warped and marred by it.
So here Shantideva is rousing himself to the joy and workability of life. And we can do the same. His cheerfulness comes in part from knowing that it never helps to indulge in depression and discontent. So interrupt the story thought and return to your immediate experience, no matter how unpleasant it is. It's always a matter of waking up, coming out of dream, including coming out of dream to seeing that we're angry. So someone read number 10.
John Tyler.
If there's a remedy when trouble strikes, what reason is there for dejection? And if there is no help for it, what use is there in being glum?
The logic. If you can fix it, great. And if you can't, don't complain. It's just, that's the way it is. It's very simple. If you can do something about your situation, do it and relax. The next stanza.
Sarah.
pain, humiliation, insults, or rebukes. We do not want them, either for ourselves or those we love. For those we do not like, it's the reverse.
Yeah, this is our ego-oriented, neurotic predilection. What we don't want for ourselves, we would like to have for our enemies. Okay, the next stanza, someone.
Carolyn.
The cause of happiness is rare, and many are the seeds of suffering. But if I have no pain, I'll never long for freedom. Therefore, O my mind, be steadfast.
So this is the benefit of anger. It makes us want to go in the direction of mental peace and clarity. Oops, something just happened on my screen. There we go. Which one did we just read? Number 12? Yeah. And this ends Shantideva's discussion on the drawbacks of anger, and the reasons to apply the antidote, patience, which is really, patience is what comes along when we practice awareness, coming back to our aware mind. And next come three categories of patience. The first one is reframing our attitude toward discomfort. So would someone read 6.13, 113th?
Philip.
Carnal folk and those devoted to the goddess endure the meaningless austerities of being cut and burned. So why am I so timid on the path of freedom?
Here Shantideva is referencing a sect of Hinduism that practiced, self-mutilation and self-pain, hurting themselves. He says, working with the kleshas can be difficult and uncomfortable because our ego is being threatened and the reward is obscure, it's hard to find. But Shantideva has unshakable confidence that we can stop being slaves to the kleshas, to the defilements, especially anger, which is the worst, and that we can experience the open, clear, intelligent, and appreciative nature of our mind. This is Tamogishepa, ordinary mind, coming back into the present, what we just did at the very beginning of this session. We have to discover this for ourselves. It's the constant practice to come back to this clarity and see whatever is happening. The next one, there it is. Next stanza, please.
Steve.
There's nothing that does not grow light through habit and familiarity. Putting up with little cares, I'll train myself to bear with great adversity.
So this is optimistic, that we can actually do this, little by little or great by great, who knows. But we won't be put off by pain encountered on the path, but we use it to stop, to drop complaint and see our own neurotic mind. Shantideva wants us to stay present with it, even when it is a great adversity. By training, we start with little cares and slight irritations and annoyances, and move on from that to greater upsets. Could someone read the next three verses?
Frederick.
Don't I see that this is so common? This is so with common irritations, bites and stings of snakes and flies, experiences of hunger and of thirst, and painful rashes on my skin. Heat and cold, the wind and rain, sickness, prison, beatings. I'll not fret about such things. To do so only aggravates my trouble. There are some whose bravery increases at the sight of their own blood, while some lose all their strength and faint when it's another's blood they see.
Yes, so he's advising us to start with small things and then be able to bear with patience greater trials. We might be going through a physical ailment of some kind, which is very debilitating and painful. And the idea is, with that, see it clearly, without lament, without complaint, without anger, of course. But someone start again with 17 and 18. Read those two.
Trip.
There are some whose bravery increases at the sight of their own blood, while some lose all their strength and faint when it's another's blood they see. This results from how the mind is set, in steadfastness or cowardice, and so I'll scorn all injury, and hardships I will disregard.
And what it means is you're going to come present for whatever it may be. Further determination, not to turn away from practice, the practice of mindfulness, which is where patience lies. Patience lies in the clarity of mind, of mindfulness. It isn't what happens to us that makes us happy or unhappy. It's how the mind reacts to it. What makes us suffer is the way we think about what's happening. Our storylines aggravate our troubles. And this is to become aware of this, is to begin to retake control of our sanity in our lives. Would someone read the next stanza?
Dan.
This results from how the mind is set, in steadfastness or cowardice, and so I'll scorn all injury, and hardships I will disregard.
Yeah. I'll scorn all injury and hardships I will disregard, and rest in awareness, which is patience. And would someone read the next stanza?
Mark. You're muted, Mark.
Sorry, what number?
19.
Sorry, thanks. When sorrows fall upon the wise, their minds should be serene and undisturbed. For in their war against defiled emotion, many are the hardships as in every battle.
It speaks for itself. It's training in not being moved by the emotions, but seeing them with clarity. Again, the story and the energy. And when the funny thing is that when you see the story and cut the story, the energy that you see doesn't last long. At least in my experience, maybe other people have a different experience. But with absent the story that we're telling ourselves about the situation, the energy of hatred, for instance, dissipates rather quickly. Okay, next stanza. I think we're on 20.
Shinyi.
Thinking scorn of every pain and vanquishing such foes as hatred. These are exploits of victorious warriors. The rest is slaying what is dead already.
So he's praising bodhisattvas who vanquish hatred and remain in ordinary mind, clear mind, vidya, rather than being ruled by the kleshas. Awakening from the kleshas requires courage and determination. You have to be determined. Would someone read the next stanza, 21?
John Tyler.
Suffering also has its worth. Through sorrow, pride is driven out, and pity felt for those who wander in samsara. Evil is avoided, goodness seems delightful.
Yeah. Pride and arrogance there are three benefits of suffering. One is that pride and arrogance are crushed. We're softened by suffering. Second is that we develop empathy for those who suffer in samsara. We're all in this boat, caught by the kleshas and blocked from awakened mind, lost in hope and fear. And the third is that we come to appreciate goodness, so-called, which can mean virtues, kindness, generosity, and so on. And it can also mean just clear, open seeing and intelligence and responsiveness. If we do this, we'll have less inclination to cause harm and anger. Now, verses 22 to 33 present the patience that comes from seeing the complex reality of any situation. These instructions can be used on the spot whenever we realize we're hooked by the kleshas, Shenpa. So would someone read number 22?
Sarah.
I am not angry with my bile and other humors. Fertile source of suffering and pain. So why should living beings give offense? They likewise are impelled by circumstance.
Yeah. So we could remember that the people who hurt or irritate us are ruled by their complex neuroses, just like us. And the harm that they do is no more personal than a natural calamity, like a flood or an avalanche. The other person's acting out, controlled by their neurotic habits. Everyone sadly experiences being controlled by their kleshas and doing harm. We could regard it as a natural catastrophe. Would someone read the next two verses?
Carolyn.
Although they are unlooked for, undesired, these ills afflict us all the same. And likewise, though unwanted and unsought, defilements nonetheless instantly arise. Never thinking, now I will be angry, people are impulsively caught up in anger. Irritation likewise comes, though never plans to be experienced.
So our enemies are out of control, as are we from time to time, and we can sympathize and understand and not take offense. This is patience. Would someone read, let's see, hold on a second. The next two stanzas.
Philip.
All defilements of whatever kind, the whole variety of evil deeds are brought about by circumstances. None is independent, none autonomous. Conditions, once assembled, have no thought that they will now give rise to some result, nor does that which is engendered think that it has been produced.
This is more of the same. Our reactions to pain are habitual and familiar, automatic, the products of our past conditioning. And until we recognize them with awareness, patience, working with our phobias, something that had happened in the past and which we remember in the present and are triggered, until we start working with patience and awareness, we will be enslaved. Could somebody read the next four stanzas? And hold on a second. I need to turn on lights. It's getting dark here.
You're up when the light comes on, Steve.
Okay.
Okay.
Conditions once assembled have no thought that they will now give rise to some result, nor does that which is engendered think that it has been produced. The primal substance, as they say, and that which has been called the self, do not arise designedly, and I do not think I will become. For that which is not born does not exist. So what could want to come to be and permanently draw toward its object, it can never cease being so. Indeed, this self, if permanent, is certainly inert like space itself. And should it meet with other factors, how could they affect it since it is unchanging?
One more.
If, when conditions act on it, it stays just as it was before, what influence have these conditions had? They say that these are agents of the self, but what connection could there be between them?
So in these verses, Shantideva is arguing against the notions of a truly existing anything, I or other, self or other. And though he doesn't offer this as another belief or assertion, because he's a true Madhyamaka. Madhyamaka, where we'll be studying at one point here, is the philosophy of emptiness, shunyata, that nothing you can't actually assert that anything exists, and you abjure all views, avoid them. So Shantideva here is pointing towards ordinary mind, clarity of mind, without any views. Could someone read the next stanza?
That'd be Fred.
All things then depend on other things, and these likewise depend, they are not independent. Knowing this, we will not be annoyed at things that are like magical appearances.
So here what he's referencing is a doctrine that some of you have studied earlier called the doctrine of dependent co-origination, that everything arises in dependence on everything else. And this is another way of talking about how nothing has any true existence, because it's just a way of, like these words, they lead into silence, and the silence into words. There's a constant flow of presenting and not presenting. And with the presenting is like a magical manifestation of this world, a constant and never changing display, without existence, without solid existence, but utterly open in mind, free from concept. So he's exhorting us to give up creating more stories, more concepts. We're like dream people, getting annoyed at dream objects. Experiencing this even momentarily, we see the absurdity of working ourselves into a frenzy. This is our lives. It's like we're constantly, nothing exists solidly. Everything is appearing and disappearing in the moment. What was here a moment ago is gone now. This is a teaching on the insubstantial, non-existent nature of everything. It helps us free ourselves from dreams of anger or anything else. Everything changes so fast. What was here 1 second is gone the next. Next verse.
Trip.
And I'm sorry, what verse are we on?
32.
Thank you. Resistance, you may say, is out of place, for what will be opposed by whom? The stream of sorrow is cut through by patience. There is nothing out of place in our assertion.
So he's saying we can't use the philosophy of emptiness, of shunyata, to justify not practicing patience. It's all one and the same. And then one more. 33.
Okay. Thus, when enemies or friends are seen to act improperly, remain serene and call to mind that everything arises from conditions.
Yeah, so no matter who behaves improperly to us, enemies or friends, we practice patience, calm, and remember that everything arises from causes and conditions. And so is empty, has no real being, appears in the moment, and is gone. We cling to these things with our minds conceptually, and yet they disappear in a second. So Michael, you want to take it from here?
Okay, I thought I'd have us all look at each other for a moment again and get our bearings a little bit. So basically, you could think of this entire chapter as following quite logically from the previous chapter, vigilant introspection, and actually carefulness that preceded that. While those two chapters related to the paramita of discipline, this obviously relates to the paramita of patience, and that among probably the key thing to keep in mind in terms of vigilant introspection was to remain in awareness, as we've been talking about tonight, so that we know what we're experiencing, so that we're not swept away by the kleshas, so that we don't fall into dreams, mindlessness, distraction, and are actually aware of what we're experiencing, what we're doing, what we're thinking, feeling, saying, and so on. And Shantideva's advice in that chapter was when we find ourselves in the throes of the kleshas, that we should be like a log, which again doesn't mean that we're trying to repress or push anything away, but it also doesn't mean that we're going to act anything out either. That we have the opportunity to just see it, and in seeing it, we can examine it, which is what Shantideva is doing in this chapter, particularly with the klesha of anger, which, as he said in the beginning, is the most destructive, the most damaging. And if you read the chapter on patience in the Bodhisattva Path of Merit and of Compassion and Wisdom, the compendium of the Vajrayana seminaries, you'll see that Trungpa Rinpoche says exactly the same thing, that aggression, of the three kleshas, aggression is the worst because it's based on total rejection of oneself and of others. And the others, yes, they can destroy our mindfulness awareness, but there's some quality of acceptance to them. Aggression is totally antithetical to the bodhisattva path, it's totally antithetical to developing bodhicitta, a mind that cares for others. And so recognizing aggression, hatred, anger, whatever we want to call it when it arises, not going further with the next thought, the next word, the next action, wherever we can cut the chain, and then looking at what we're experiencing. That's what Shantideva is asking us to do, that we can actually examine it. Trungpa Rinpoche often talked about becoming inquisitive as a result of our practice. And this happens because, one, we develop some steadiness so we can actually see what we're experiencing, but also because we can take a fresh look and see beyond our habits, our fixations and our, conventional ways of dealing with things. It can actually take a fresh look, and so we can be inquisitive. And that's also what Shantideva is asking us to do. I think the section that John just read, or that we all just read and that John discussed, where we actually see the emptiness of things, is particularly profound. I have to admit, this might be a bit of a sidetrack, so I'm a little wary, but I'll say it anyway. It's interesting to me as a psychologist to think about some of the different things that Shantideva asks us to do in this chapter, because they're so similar in some ways to cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, that we actually look at our thinking, or our self-talk as it's often called, that we try to see through self-talk that's negative and self-defeating, that we actually are encouraged, or with the help of a therapist, reframe situations so we see them in a way that's more workable and always more truthful in essence. And that we actually come to recognize and look at cognitive errors, the ways in thinking that lead us into all kinds of difficulties. The difference is that there is nothing in that form of therapy that's as profound as the view of emptiness, and that ultimately that's the greatest cognitive error of all, the belief that we exist, and all of the actions, all of the kleshas that result from holding on to ego. And another way to think of the section that John just read is the instruction in the Lojong slogans, that in post-meditation, be a child of illusion. That so often we take things to be real that aren't, or we take things to be real in a way that they're not, and then act on that with aggression, compassion, and ignorance as well. And this creates all kinds of difficulty for us. So anyway, we'll continue with verse 34. I'll get to the right page myself. And this is actually talking about, Pema says there are three types of patience. Trungpa Rinpoche does as well, but the wording is a little different. But basically, the first one was learning to bear discomfort, which Trungpa Rinpoche actually called overcoming other people's destructiveness. The second is understanding the complexity of situations or realizing the nature of other people's aggression. And the third is patience that comes from developing tolerance. And that's what we're talking about, beginning with verse 34, patience that comes from developing tolerance. Or in the Kunzig Palden's commentary, he calls it the patience of making light of what causes harm. So with that, let us go back to the text. And could someone read verse 34?
That would be Shinyi.
If things could be according to their wish, no suffering would ever come to any one of all embodied beings, for none of them wants pain of any kind.
So this is something that we have to keep in mind. This is actually, as we'll see later on when we read the chapter on meditation, the basis for developing the equality of beings, that all beings don't want to suffer and that all beings wish for happiness. Kunzig Palden said, related to the section we just talked about how anger arises out of causes and conditions and is fundamentally illusory because it doesn't have any real substance of its own, which is why it's impermanent. We don't stay angry all the time, although some people make a pretty determined effort. But if Kunzig Palden said, if beings had the freedom to be as they wanted without depending on conditions, it would follow that no one would suffer. But we know right off that's not true, that even though all beings want to be happy, beings do bring sufferings on themselves. We do this to ourselves. And this is because we're mistaken about what brings happiness and comfort, and because we're mistaken about the nature of the kleshas, which is why it's so important to come to see anger as the sorrow-bearing enemy, as John talked about. That when we become mistaken about what brings happiness and comfort, then we engage in actions that just perpetuates our suffering. So if someone could read verses 35 and 36.
Sarah.
Yet carelessly, all unaware, they tear themselves on thorns, and ardent in pursuit of wives and goods, they starve themselves of nourishment. Some hang themselves or leap into the void, take poison or consume unhealthy food, or by their evil conduct bring destruction on themselves.
So now we're looking at some of the ways in which beings do bring suffering upon themselves through their mistaken views about what will make them happy and mistaken views about the kleshas, a mistaken view of ego. The first verse, 35, actually relates more to ignorance, that just through, by yet carelessly, all unaware, just lack of attention, being distracted, that we bring suffering upon ourselves. And verse 36, even more so, the kind of suffering that comes from unbridled passion. That people end up engaging in destructive behaviors and destructive actions, lie, cheat, steal, blind pursuit, where we don't take care of ourselves or even actually outright harm ourselves. So could someone read verses 37 and 38?
Carolyn.
For when affliction seizes them, they even slay themselves, the selves they love so much. So how can they not be the cause of others' bodily distress? Although we almost never feel compassion for those who, through defilement, bring about their own perdition, what purpose does our anger serve?
So what we're talking about here is that a lot of the behavior that we experience as negative from people comes out of their own mistaken views about, again, what brings them happiness, mistaken views of the kleshas. It comes about as a result of the causes and conditions that bring about the kleshas. that again, really are not what people want, but because of confusion, because of distraction, and because people give in to the power of the kleshas, they end up engaging in behaviors that not only can cause irritation and harm to us, but complete harm to them. This is actually one of the lines from Shantideva that, again, I worked in, as I think people know, I worked for a number of years as a psychologist in a school with children designated special ed due to various psychiatric disorders. And this is one of the points that I would make with people sometimes, exactly what Shantideva says here, that they even slay themselves, the selves they love so much. So how can they not be the cause of others' bodily distress? That if people become so caught up in their kleshas, so caught up in their anger, passion, and ignorance, but particularly their anger, that they will injure or kill themselves, then it's foolish to think they're going to treat us any better. And this doesn't mean that we should be happy about the way that they're treating us, but it means that anger as a response really makes no sense, and that it's based on a complete misunderstanding of how causes and conditions evoke the loss of control that can come with really extreme anger. And what this reminded me of also was the lines back from the in the chapter on carefulness, where Shantideva himself talked about the kleshas, and where he says, "I am as if benumbed by sorcery, as if reduced to total mindlessness. I do not know what dulls my wits. Oh, what is it that has me in its grip?" And in the next verse, "Anger and lust have reduced me to such slavery." So we come to realize this could be true of ourselves, and this helps us and hopefully through our practice of meditation and through our study, we're becoming increasingly free of that. But this is why we can then develop compassion for others who don't have a path and don't have the ability or the fortune to be able to practice meditation and study the path. So if someone would read verse 38.
Philip.
Although we almost never feel compassion for those who, through defilement, bring about their own perdition, what purpose does our anger serve?
So we're being asked, even if we're not able to feel compassion for people who bring harm to us, what good does our anger do? And what the point that it'll make is that it just perpetuates our suffering, our confusion. Could someone read verses 39 and 40?
Steve.
If those who are like wanton children are by nature prone to injure others, there's no reason for our rage. It's like resenting fire for being hot. And if their faults are fleeting and contingent, if living beings are by nature mild, it's likewise senseless to resent them. As well be angry at the sky when it is full of smoke.
Yeah, so here Shantideva is continuing to ask us to be inquisitive about our experiences, to look at our thinking, and to realize how illogical it is. And what we're given in these two verses are two possibilities. One is that if we think that people are by nature bad or evil in some way, then there's no real reason for our rage. As he says, it's like resenting fire for being hot. That would just be the way things are. And, we might want to take precautions, be careful around fire, but being angry for fire for being hot makes no sense. And if, on the other hand, we see that beings are by nature mild, or even more strongly, we'd say from a Shambhala point of view, that our basic nature is basically good, and that any faults are fleeting and contingent, that they're just the result of what the teachings traditionally call adventitious stains, then it's senseless to resent them. It's not the person that we're angry at. It's the klesha. And that's what he says. It's just as like being angry at the sky when it's full of smoke. And the point that Pema makes at this point with all of the different verses that we've read so far, all of these different ways of looking at situations that could provoke anger in us, is to think that thinking in these ways can help us cool down, that they create a gap. They help us shift gears because we look at the situation in a different way and realize that our attribution of anger, our projection of aggression, doesn't make sense when we really start looking at the situation. Could someone read verse 41?
Fred.
Although it is their sticks that hurt me, I am angry at the ones who wield them, striking me. But they in turn are driven by their hatred. Therefore, with their hatred, I should take offense.
Yeah, so again, he's continuing to say the same thing, that we should be not angry at the person, but we should understand that this behavior, that aggressive behavior, comes out of the person's lack of control, lack of mindfulness, lack of self-understanding, self-awareness that results from the kleshas. And as an example, he says that that's the sticks that hurt them, but it's really the stick is an impersonal, inanimate thing. So we don't get angry at that. But in the same way, the person really isn't in control of themselves. So in the same way, it's not that they're exactly inanimate, but that what sense does it actually make to get angry at them? It would be so the question here altogether from Pema's point of view is, how do we develop the patience to not retaliate? And she says, by developing tenderness and understanding for the person, or if not that, at least see that our own aggression, our own aggressive response, our retaliation would harm us, that hopefully we can stop ourselves. And she actually suggests at this point contemplating three things. Why do I get angry at people and not inanimate things? She gives the example of a branch falling on our head. It hurts, but we don't get angry at the branch because it's inanimate. We don't attribute any intentionality to it. How much of our anger follows from our fixed views of good and bad, right and wrong, fair or unfair? And then ultimately, why don't we have tolerance and compassion for people who, just like me, keep creating our own misery? And again, the most important point is the real culprits, so to speak, are the kleshas themselves. Could someone read verse 42?
Trip.
In just the same way in the past, I it was who injured living beings. Therefore, it is right that injury should come to me, their torturer.
The point that Shantideva is making here, and again, this is that a lot of the experience of aggression, that when we experience aggression, when we experience misfortune, that it's a result of our karma, and that, or at least we could consider that possibility. I'd say there's no way to really know, but at least if we think this way, it might lead to less anger. And again, it doesn't mean that we're basically bad. It doesn't mean that we deserve punishment. But we should also consider that a lot of times, even in this lifetime, there are a lot of times where we're unaware of how we might have given offense to people. And so we may actually have more to do with aggression that we experience than we might think. Pema notes that the tendency for Westerners to think if something bad happens, it's because people are basically bad or being punished. That this actually gets in the way of actually learning, from our experiences. But I think the main point here again is, not giving into anger. If thinking in this way helps, then us to not give into our anger, not give into retaliation, not give into reactivity, then we can use it in that way. Could someone read verse 43 and 44?
Sarah.
Their weapons and my body, both are causes of my torment. They their weapons, I my body brandished. Who then is more worthy of my rage? This body, running sore in human form, merely touched, it cannot stand the pain. I'm the one who grasped it in my blind attachment. Whom should I resent when pain occurs?
So basically, again, we're asked to reflect on the fact that injury comes to us through causes and conditions, that it's the coming together of a lot of different things, including our attachment to body, how our minds are set, as it was said in one of the previous verses that John talked about, and that why only blame the other? That's the question that Pema says we could ask here. That a lot of times our anger comes out of how we take things or how we understand things. This is kind of a tricky point because it's not meant to be a blame the victim thing, and we could talk about that another time. But the basic idea is that we can actually look at ways in which different situations, as we know, provoke anger in one person, and to another person, they don't bother them at all. And again, the point that Pema says we consider is that we can't stop others, but we can control ourselves. Could someone read verses 45 and 46?
Dan.
We who are like children shrink from pain but love its causes. We hurt ourselves through our misdeeds. So why should others be the object of our rage? And who indeed should I be angry with? This pain is all my own contriving. Likewise, all the janitors of hell and all the groves of razor trees.
Okay, so the part in the end of that verse, the pain is all my own contriving, likewise all the janitors of hell and all the groves of razor trees, speaks to the degree to which our own attachments and our own confusion, our own mindlessness brings pain to ourselves. And that, yes, other people are involved as well, but that we can actually approach the situation in a way that doesn't involve blame. In some ways, this relates very much to the slogan, drive all blames into one. But the key point here, again, is that when we experience aggression, we could be like a log and then actually look at our thinking, look at what we're experiencing, and see what actually makes sense. Personally, I think it makes more sense as a practice to try to think about situations we've already been in and think about them in some of the ways that Shantideva says. But if it comes to mind in the moment, some of these contemplations are quite powerful in reducing the intensity of our kleshas. Could someone read verses 47 through 49?
Carolyn.
Those who harm me rise against me. It's my karma that has summoned them. And if through these beings go to hell, I'm the one who grasp it in. I'm the one who grasp. Is it not I who bring their ruin? Because of them and through my patience, all my many sins are cleansed and purified, but they will be the ones who, thanks to me, will have the long-drawn agonies of hell. Therefore, I am their tormentor. Therefore, it is they who bring me benefit. Thus, with what perversity, pernicious mind, will you be angry with your enemies?
Okay. So in these verses, Shantideva presents yet another reason or another way of thinking about situations where we're confronted with someone who is aggressive toward us or acts in a harmful way toward us. And what the point that he's making is ultimately, if we can meet aggression with patience, that we in fact create a tremendous merit. That we're benefited by the opportunity to practice patience. This is really very much one of the. When I was at seminary, somebody asked Trungpa Rinpoche about the slogan, be grateful to everyone, and said, why, if a single moment of anger can destroy eons of merit, why should we be grateful to them? And Trungpa Rinpoche's answer was, if we can meet aggression with non-aggression with patience, that we create 100 kalpas of merit. And that is what Shantideva is talking about here, that the opportunity to practice patience brings tremendous merit if we're able to do that, if we're able to meet aggression with awareness, with non-aggression, with patience, with kindness, with compassion, that it brings about tremendous merit for us. And it actually is, incredibly beneficial toward us. But for those who are, so through them, as Shantideva says, all my many sins are cleansed and purified. But because of us, they'll be drawn into the agonies of hell because they're not practicing patience. And so it gets totally reversed. Therefore, I'm their tormentor. It is they who bring me benefit. Thus, with what perversity pernicious, so he's asking himself, with what perversity pernicious mind would I be angry with my enemies? So we're, again, really asked to let go of aggression at this point. Since our intention is not to have, the commentary on this is clearly our intention is to not have people be angry and therefore be sent to the long-drawn agonies of hell. It's not our aggression to be that way. But that the point is that when someone is aggressive toward us, we have a tremendous opportunity to benefit ourselves. And so that's why we could be grateful to everyone. Could someone read verses 50 to 51?
Philip?
If a patient quality of mind is mine, I shall avoid the pains of hell. But though indeed I save myself, what of my foes? What fate's in store for them? If I repay them harm for harm, indeed, they'll not be saved thereby. My conduct will in turn be marred, austerity of patience brought to nothing.
So the point here is that we have the opportunity to be compassionate. We have the opportunity to practice patience, non-aggression. We have the opportunity to remain in awareness rather than giving into the kleshas. And what he's saying in these verses is that we shouldn't waste it, that if we actually retaliate, if we become angry ourselves, if we repay them harm for harm, we don't do anything for them, and our own conduct is marred, and the austerity of patience is brought to nothing. So again, it's the cultivation of patience that ultimately frees us. The next set of verses, 52 to 63, actually begin a different section where Shantideva begins with these verses, and will continue into the rest of the chapter that we'll read for next week, talking about different ways in which to approach particular situations. Which are essentially related again to the 8 worldly dharmas, gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and insignificance, and pleasure and pain. And in particular, he's going to talk about how we react to being scorned or blamed, or in some way, seen in a negative light by people. So if someone could read verse 52.
Okay. Steve?
Because the mind is bodiless, it cannot be destroyed by anyone. Because of mind's attachment to the body, this body is oppressed by pain.
So the point here is that the mind itself is bodiless and can't be injured in any physical way. But what the pain we do experience is because of mind's attachment to body. In other words, we say, this is me, and all that arises as a result of that, the kleshas and so on. So the mind can't be harmed, but does experience suffering through attachment to the body. Can someone read verses 53 and 54?
Frederick?
Scorn and hostile words and comments that I do not like to hear. My body is not harmed by them. What reason do you have, O mind, for your resentment? The enmity that others show me, since in this or future lives, it cannot actually devour me. Why should I be so averse to it?
So he's asking what is really hurt. In some ways, as Pema says, this is like the sticks and stones. You know, sticks and stones can break my bones. There's no physical harm that comes through words. And what we're talking about in these verses is developing patience when we experience being scorned, criticized, treated with condescension, blamed. And as Pema says in the beginning, these are just sounds, but it's how we interpret them, because they can't hurt us directly. Words don't harm the body. So again, why, it's important that we not overreact. That and also that we might say, well, then maybe scorn itself wouldn't, but that enmity of others can cause us harm. But his point is that it can actually devour us. So why should we be so adverse to it? It doesn't mean that it's pleasant. It just means that we shouldn't see it as being more significant, serious, or damaging than it is, because then we'll overreact and we'll become angry. Verse 55.
Who's next? Wait a second. Sarah.
Perhaps I turn from it because it hinders me from having what I want. But all my property I'll leave behind, while sins will keep me steady company.
So the point that Shantideva is making here is that perhaps we think we turn away from scorn, blame, criticism, because it'll stop us from getting what we want. But what he asks us to do is to really look at the situation with a long-term perspective, that whatever it is that we might gain, we'll leave behind when we die. The one thing that we'll take with us is the negativity, the karma that we develop through engaging in aggressive behavior. So he's asking us to really think about what's important here. And again, to be able to forbear without reacting aggressively to situations like this. Could someone read, so as Pema says, verses 56 through 61 continue with this theme of you can't take it with you. So again, he's asking us to realize impermanence and not cause harm to ourselves through evil actions for the sake of short-term, some kind of short-term goal in our present life. So could someone read verses 56 through 61?
Trip.
Better for me to die today than live a long and evil life. However long the days of those like me, the pain of dying will be all the same. One man dreams he lives 100 years of happiness, but then he wakes. Another dreams an instant's joy, but then he likewise wakes. And when they wake, the happiness of both is finished, never to return. Likewise, when the hour of death comes around, our lives are over, whether brief or long. Though we be rich in worldly goods, delighting in our wealth for many years, despoiled and stripped as though by thieves, we must go naked and with empty hands. Perhaps we'll claim that by our wealth we live, and living gather merit, dissipating evil. But if we are aggressive for the sake of profit, won't our gains be evil, all our merits lost? Through 61, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. And if the aim for which we live is thereby wasted and undone, what use is there in living thus when evil is the only consequence?
So what he's saying in these verses is to keep in mind impermanence and to keep in mind the great harm that anger does, as we read about in the beginning of the chapter, that it's better to live a short life without evil than a long and evil life and then suffer the consequences of that for eons to come. And then in the end, the pain of dying is the same in any case. And he points out that whether we have a dream of living 100 years of happiness, but then wake, or even just an instant of happiness, but then likewise wake, that either way, it ends. It's impermanent. And the happiness of both is finished, never to return. And then, though we might be rich in worldly goods, delighting in wealth for many years, in the end, when we die, all of that is meaningless. That we can't take it with us. And then he makes the point too that in the pursuit of wealth, even if we think that by living long and gathering merit through generosity, that if we pursue wealth in a way that's harmful, if we are aggressive for the sake of profit, won't our gains be evil, all our merits lost? Talking about the danger of wrong livelihood, where even if we have conventional success in this life, that we're creating the seeds for tremendous suffering through living in a way that is harmful. Even if we do some good things with our wealth, that again, ruthlessness for the sake of gain is pointless. As he says in the end, if the aim for which we live is thereby wasted and undone, what use is there living thus when evil is the only consequence? And then, could someone read verses 62 and 63?
Shini.
And if, when people slander us, we claim our anger is because they injure others, how is it we do not resent the slander when it's aimed at someone else? And if we bear with this antipathy because it's due to other factors, why are we impatient when they slander us? Defilement, after all, has been the cause of it.
So again, at the end with verse 63, it again comes down to realizing that aggression that's directed at us comes out of the kleshas, that it's and that we can develop sympathy and compassion for people because we see ourselves sometimes how we get swept away, and at the same time we have compassion as well because we have a path and a means to try to work ourselves free of all of this. So when people slander us, if we try to say it's that we're angry because they injure others, how is it that we don't resent slander when it's aimed at someone else? In other words, there's a subtle ego clinging there if we claim that our anger is because they injure others. And if we bear with this antipathy because it's due to other factors, why do we become impatient when they slander us? So it's actually looking at the ways in which we can be somewhat hypocritical in thinking this thing through. That the important thing again is coming to understand that the scorn, criticism, blame, all of that comes out of the kleshas and comes out of karma, and that by looking at this situation in a different way, that we can allow ourselves to become free of our own aggression. And that's really the point of this chapter on patience. So I think that's where I'll stop. You have a minute for any quick questions. Otherwise, people come to the discussion group tomorrow night. Robert?
Thanks. I have a quick question. You mentioned 3 questions we should ask ourselves about anger. Why do I get angry at people and not inanimate things? How much of our anger follows from our fixed views? Why don't we have tolerance for people like me? And it sounded like you were referring to another source where that came from. I was just curious, who wrote that and what book?
That is some of the questions that Pema suggests in her book, No Time to Lose, or I think it's also titled Becoming a Bodhisattva. That we could, again, as Trungpa Rinpoche said, be inquisitive about our experience and look at our thoughts and feelings, the way we understand situations, and maybe open up to a wider view. Great. I think Philip said he could do the closing chants, yes? All right. Well,
Sure. Can you put them up, please?
I will.
We will end with a prayer for peace, then by dedicating the merit generated through our practice to the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times, and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled, and may all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Michael. Thank you,
Thanks,
John.
Michael.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
See you tomorrow.
Good evening.
Have a good night.
Good night.